Okay, I think we've got a sizable amount of people in the webinar right now, so I'm going to start. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aisha. I'm from Jumpstart Disruptive Innovation, short for JDI. And I just want to thank you for being here for D-Day Reality Check, Scaling Healthcare Systems to Asia. So today isn't about hype, it's about execution. It's about what really happens after the pilot, after the pitch, and after the press release. We'll dive into what it really takes to scale, and we have our team panel that's showcased on this slide that you see in the screen share right now, to give you insights on that. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So, JDI Reality Check distills what seasoned operators have learned from being in the trenches of scaling healthcare companies. In this first series of JDI that we're launching, we're bringing forward thinking leaders to share their hard-earned lessons that most decks actually leave out. It's the real talk, guys. Yeah. So we know resources are limited and every decision carries weight. That's why this platform exists. So you don't have to learn everything the hard way. Instead of building in isolation, stand on the shoulders who have already navigated the complexity and gained the scars to prove it. Next slide, please. Okay, for those who don't know us, the organizers of this webinar, JDI, Jumpstart Disruptive Innovation, is a venture catalyst. Since 2016, we've supported innovative companies across fintech, F&B, e-commerce, education, and increasingly healthcare to build and scale from Asia to the world. We have been coined by Straits Times as the fastest growing company in 2024 and 2025, and we're proud of that stature. We operate across 5 pillars, as you can see at the bottom of the slide. Tech JDI, building software and AI solutions. Talent JDI, building and managing tech teams in Vietnam. Launch JDI, helping companies access new markets. Capital JDI, supporting venture fundraising. And Venture JDI, building new tech ventures. So, at the core, we help founders move from idea to infrastructure. And that's exactly what today is about. Next slide, please. So I double down on two of our business units, Talent JDI and Tech JDI. For Talent JDI, when founders think about scaling, they often think about customers first, but scaling fails because of teams. Through Talent JDI, we help companies recruit, build, and manage tech and innovation business teams in Vietnam. This includes dedicated teams, freelance talent, full delivery hubs, recruitment, EOR, office setup, and to date, we have 1,200 engineers hired, teams scaled from 0 to 80, strong long-term partnerships. Because scaling isn't just about speed, it's about sustainable execution. For Tech JDI, it's really about short-term engineering support. Sometimes you don't really need a full team. You need velocity. Through Tech JDI, we deploy on-demand developers from our in-house bench. 3 to 12 months engagements, flat rate models, fully employed and managed by JDI, 300 engineers across 3 cities in Vietnam. And our value proposition is simple: fast, flexible, scalable tech talent. We are the overhead of building from scratch, especially critical in healthcare where burn rate, compliance, and timelines collide. Next, please. Now, on to our use cases. First up is Mesh Bio. Mesh Bio focuses on chronic diseases program, where care is ongoing, multi-step, and varies across patient cohorts. As the platform matured, this platform that we were working with, the Tech JDI is working with, they began integrating with hospitals and clinics. That's when complexity multiplied and more stakeholders are involved, more workflow variations, higher expectations around governance and traceability. And here's what people don't talk about enough. AI is only as powerful as the data it can access. And accessing data from healthcare institutions, that's entirely a different game. At Tech JDI, we didn't build the AI. We actually didn't build the AI for Mesh Bio, but we built the integration layer, the infrastructure, the pipes, that allowed Mesh Bio's platform to securely connect with hospitals and clinics and actually operate in the real world. Next, please. Next case study. Next case study is SpeedDoc. SpeedDoc actually delivers home medical care by coordinating doctors, nurses, diagnostics, logistics, and patients on a single platform, or often under intense time pressure. So, as volumes grew, a real-time data became mission critical. But even more important was keeping care coordination predictable across consultations, diagnostics, prescriptions, and follow-ups. We strengthened their backend execution as part of Tech JDI, so workflows still stayed reliable and complexity scale, reducing manual coordination and improving consistency for clinical and ops teams. You know what the key insight is here? Before AI can transform healthcare, the infrastructure must be ready. Real-time data, secure systems, structured workflows that don't break under pressure. So, building features is easy, but maintaining consistency at scale is not. That's where we come in after launch, where execution really matters. Okay, so that's pretty much all for the JDI introduction and the use cases. We go on to the next part, which is FemTech Association Asia. Next slide, please. So I'll get Lindsay to unmute herself and talk a little bit about FemTech Association Asia, who's also a knowledge partner of our event. Lindsay, please.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lindsay Davis. I'm the founder of FemTech Association Asia. We launched here in Singapore in October of 2021, but since have grown to over 80 startups in our network and broader ecosystem, corporate partners, government partners, etc., across 10 countries in Asia. We are the first and largest specialist advisory and industry network supporting women's health and technology companies across Asia. And that also includes with global connectivity with members in the UK, Bangladesh, the US, the Netherlands, and more. So really pleased to be a knowledge partner today and happy to talk about our vision of available, accessible, and affordable healthcare with anyone, anytime, and anyone who's in particular interested in women's health and growing women's health and technology businesses or FemTech businesses in Asia. I look forward to connecting. Thank you so much, Aisha, for having us.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Lindsay. Very short and crisp and very impactful as well. Next up, we have Chisel to talk a little bit about themselves. Chisel is our community partner. Chisel has been with us actually with Chisel, short for the long form of Chisel is Center for Healthcare Innovation, Startup Enterprise Link. So it's a body within Center of Healthcare Innovation who has been involved with us with our previous events as well. And we're happy to have this continued partnership with Center of Healthcare Innovation, specifically with Chisel. We have Kai, the senior executive at to give us a little bit of introduction about the healthcare InnoMatch. So Kai, please unmute yourself.
Yep, thank you, Aisha. So Chisel, the CHI Startup Enterprise Link is a program that aims to accelerate the adoption of market-ready healthcare innovations that are fit for mainstream use and to give the community quicker access to the latest innovations globally out there. So we bring in solutions through our Healthcare InnoMatch, which is a global innovation challenge that invites participants to pitch solutions to solve pressing challenges and transform the future of healthcare. So the winning startups and SMEs then have the funding opportunity supported by a robust evaluation framework to demonstrate the proof of value of their market-ready solutions with one of the 3 Singapore healthcare clusters locally. Can I have the next slide, please? So Chisel 2026 is our 6th year running, and across the last 5 years, we have had almost 1,500 participants across 88 countries joining Chisel, and 38 finalists have competed for $10.5 million. And the test bid grant is actually $500K from 2024 onwards. And 18 of the winning solutions were then awarded $9.7 million to develop their test beds with more than 13 public healthcare institutions and community partners. And from all of this test bidding, more than 2,800 patients have and will be benefiting, with 8 of our projects completed and 11 ongoing. And we're proud to say that some of our projects have also gone on to be awarded with follow-on funding of 2.24 million to spread their solutions to other public healthcare institutes and agencies. So our open call had actually started this year on 12th of February, and we'll be hoping to see the startups and SMEs who are in today's call joining us this year. Thank you. I'll pass the time back to Aisha.
Thank you so much, Kai. All right, let's move on to the agenda for the day. Okay, so what are we expecting for today? We already have heard some of my opening remarks and as well as the introduction to JDI, introduction to FemTech Association Asia, introduction to Chisel. We'll move on very shortly to the expert panel discussion, followed by the live Q&A that you guys can ask your questions, your burning questions, and then we'll have some closing remarks. So moving on to the speaker introduction, please. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Dr. Azhar Ahmad. Dr. Azhar is a medical doctor, career strategist, TEDx speaker, and founder of the Azhar Ahmad Academy in Kuala Lumpur. He combines frontline clinical experience with leadership coaching, bringing talent, operations, and real clinic realities. He understands both what happens in the boardroom and what happens in the wards. And that is a really powerful combination. And his 20 years of experience being in the inside man makes him the perfect guide for today's discussion. Next up, I would like to introduce Miss Lindsay Davis. Lindsay is the founder of FemTech Association Asia, a leading advisory and industry network advancing women's health through technology. She's been featured widely, commissioned by UNESCAP, and serves on advisory boards including Women in Global Health Singapore and OV Health Indonesia. Lindsay brings a regional perspective on where FemTech and digital health more broadly is truly heading in Asia. We're really glad to have her. Next up, we've got Kevin Ben Laurence. Mr. Kevin, founder of CEO and SingMed Clinic. Kevin leads the modernization of clinical workflows and operations in Indonesia at SingMed Clinic. If you want to talk about innovation, Kevin is the guy. He brings frontline delivery experience and has managed approximately $6 billion in healthcare related assets across Asia Pacific at a Fortune Global 500 company. So, Mr. Kevin, he understands capital, he understands clinics, and he understands scale. And that's why we have him today. Next up, let me introduce Mr. Kenneth Low. Kenneth is a co-founder and CEO of Mito Health, an advancing startup right now that's scaling in the US. Kenneth is a co-founder of Mito Health, preventive health startup redefining diagnostics and personalized care through data-driven insights. He brings experience moving from early concept to sustainable operations across diverse healthcare systems. So he's the startup guy here, Kenneth, and which is exactly what founders need to hear about and what founders need to connect with. This is not his first rodeo. Kenneth has started multiple companies before Mito Health. So he's a serial entrepreneur, and we're so honored to have him on the panel today. All right, moving on to the discussion topics for today. Just giving you a big overview of what we're going to talk about today. Topic number 1, doing business in US versus Asia. Let's start with the difficult truth. What works in Asia often fails, or what works in the US often fails in Asia. That's what I mean. Different procurement cycles, different regulatory philosophies, different buyer psychology. So I like to ask the panel later, just as a warm-up, what must founders unlearn when entering Asia? So just the panelists will cover this part more broadly, just as a beginning of the panel discussion. Topic number 2, from pilot to production. Every startup celebrates pilots, but pilots are easy. Production is the war. What are the common blockers that you see companies when they try to scale system-wide? And what does readiness actually look like, to go into scale? So that's more on the technical aspect of things that we'll cover in the panel discussion as well. Topic number three, licensing and regulatory complexity. Southeast Asia is fragmented, and different markets, different regulators, different accreditation requirements. How do founders approach this without getting paralyzed? And how and when do you engage regulators, and what do you focus on building first? And last but not least, this is the part where it's a little bit of an extra thing. If we have time, we will cover topic number 4 is rolling out AI responsibly. Because everybody is talking about AI in healthcare, right? But where does AI actually deliver value today? Where is it still premature? How do we balance speed with data governance, with bias, with explainability, with clinical trust, and patient safety? So there's a lot of things that we can cover on the topic number 4 if we have time. But topic 1, 2, 3 will be the main part that we'll definitely cover. And I'm not sure whether we can cover all the bullet points that you see in this slide, but we'll do our best because we only have 1 hour. Yeah. Okay. So I am done talking, and I'm really excited to bring you to the climax of this session, which is the panel discussion. And I will hand the time over to Dr. Azhar, the moderator of this event or this panel, to kick off the session. Dr. Azhar, please unmute yourself and kick off the session.
Okay, thank you, Aisha, for this opportunity. First of all, of course, thank you for JDI for putting together this program. It looks very exciting. It's a topic that we all want to learn more. So, and we have a very esteemed panel of speakers today. As I wrote in my LinkedIn post, I have a little bit of imposter syndrome when I read about their profile because they all have done so many things, so many new innovations, so many new projects that I feel like I'm only this big. But at the same time, we are here to learn, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion from all of them. So we only have an hour, so I'm gonna jump straight into the question. Yeah, the first one is about the differences in doing business in Asia and in the US. From the experience of the speakers, what do you think are the main thing that people forget to do when they are localizing in Asia? So all of you have experience already working in Asia and also working outside. What are the main differences that makes localization in Asia different to what people are expecting? So maybe I'll start with Kenneth first because Kenneth is in the US at the moment in terms of
Yeah,
working. Right now he's in
yeah,
Singapore, right?
yeah. I'm in Singapore for a couple of weeks, but
Yeah.
we've been in the US for 2 years now. So just a quick one-liner. So we basically are a consumer longevity platform that helps people live healthier for longer. And we have been operating in a different regulatory environment. So in Singapore, very much, MOH, HCSA licensing requirements to become a clinic. And I would argue the other way is even more complicated because in the US, there are 50 states. So I think a lot of people think that the US is one country, but actually the US is a country of 50 little countries. And
Right.
every country is in itself also very different, though similar in the sense of a federal level and a state level. So I could go very much into the detail on this route, which is Asia to US, because I feel like from a market expansion standpoint, I actually know a lot of companies looking to expand into the US markets as well. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think if you want to do that, that is also
yeah,
okay. Yeah.
yeah. So long story short, it's usually either the West Coast or the East Coast. So it depends where you want to be. We started with the West Coast in San Francisco because that's where a lot of the tech innovation happens.
Hmm.
Um, and I would also argue the other um, idea that it's actually it's easier to get a pilot out in the US than it is in Asia because I feel like generally Asia companies and MNCs and governments are very risk averse, and pilots are generally more difficult to do in Asia. So it's
Okay.
counter to, I guess, a lot of the ideas that we wanted to sort of speak about, which is to come to Asia and explore pilots here. But um, that has been all real experience so far. That the US is a lot easier to just get started and rolling, and once you have like certain um, customer personas, both on the B2B and B2C side of things. It's easier to go state to state across the US versus
Right.
state to state or city to city in Southeast Asia or Asia, because it's just so vastly different languages, cultures. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Even Malaysia and Singapore is very,
yeah,
very different, right? Even though
very
we're
different.
next
Yeah.
door. Okay, maybe I'll move on to Lindsay. What about your experience, Lindsay, in terms of the big differences when people are thinking about localizing what they have built, whether they started from Asia to the US or vice versa?
So, based on my accent, I'm American, but I'm actually British American. So, I've lived in a few different countries now and secondments across, the Middle East and China and New York City as well. So, I've been kind of all over the place. So, coming here now to Singapore, where I've lived for the past 6 years, I launched FemTech Association focusing on women's health. So, keep in mind everything I'm saying today will be focused on women's health with Asia as our primary market of focus. Now, with that in mind, when I think about the US versus Asia, first of all, Asia is massive, as Kenneth just said. So it's really hard to say, what about Asia? First of all, I don't think I represent Asia. I'm a 6 foot tall, blonde, British American woman. So can't speak for Asia, can only speak to the data and the research that we do. So I would say the first thing is when we talk about women's health, it's historically been under-researched, underserved, and underfunded. When we talk about research, a big difference is we've seen the US with kind of the majority of research worldwide around women's health. And we are starting to see that pick up, specifically looking at what we're doing with FemTech Association Asia on consumer behavior and consumer attitudes, consumer spending. But moreover, what we see organizations like GLOW out of NUS focusing specifically on Asian women's health. So we're starting to see more data specifically about cultures, people, consumer behavior, as well as on the clinical side. So that is the first difference I'd say, is that prior to really a lot of this, femtech rise in Asia, we really were using more Western data. So first of all, I think there's a data misalignment that we're starting to correct. Secondly, I talked about underserved. The US, again, when we look at the market there, it's more advanced when it comes to actually educating the consumer around female health or women's health. So, the menopause discussion is far underway. We really only saw that about a year ago here in Singapore, and now starting to move out into broader Southeast Asia, as well as into China, where, FemTech China launched this past year. So really, we're starting to see that development happen with Japan really as a regional leader in FemTech. So secondly, I'd say education is a little bit different, that we're accelerating fast here in Asia, but we still have more consumer work to do. And then thirdly, when we talk about funding, the majority of the funding still for femtech and women's health is out of the US. But what we are seeing is now Singapore becoming a leader in the space. So what I would say is if we're looking for funding right now as a femtech or women's health company, the US is still the leader. However, we are seeing growth in the space, in investment, in enthusiasm for the industry, and supporting women's health as a true commercial opportunity and frankly untapped consumer market in Asia. So maybe those are three things we can think about: is data, the consumer education, and thirdly, looking at funding.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I noticed you use the word consumer a lot. I'm gonna come back to that after we hear from Kevin. Kevin, what do you think the major differences from your side in implementing the innovation in Indonesia?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Azhar. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity. So back then, when I was in investment company, we actually invested into a company called Pipe RX in the US. So that's kind of like assisting healthcare professionals, doctors, connecting with pharmacy. That's in the US. So what's happening in Asia is that I would like to echo what Kenneth said first, that US is like 50 states combined together, and population is about 300 mil ish, 300 plus mil. If we were to look at ASEAN by itself, it's 600 mil, but 11 countries. So there is, if you were to say about localization and as to that point, right? Actually, in every region, you need to localize. It's no brainer that you need to localize. You enter like East Coast, they have certain styles. West Coast, they have certain styles, right? And if we were to look at what the investment my team and I did in the US, a lot of it is reimbursement based. how can we get government project? But if you look at the Southeast Asian perspective, let's look at Singapore. It's a lot about public-private partnership. One aspect is public, one aspect is private. It's the same in Malaysia, Dr. Azhar, I'm very sure. The private healthcare is actually thriving quite well. Public itself is taking care of the general public. Same for many of the Southeast Asian country. And I would to say that maybe slightly, if you were to look at the Far East Asia side, Korea and Japan, they have their own style, a lot of reimbursement. So that's why the strategies that each companies would like to take on for a certain market has to be based on a lot of market research. You cannot go in thinking that this place is the same everywhere, right? So like, for example, if you were to look at ASEAN alone, if you were to use English or you to use Bahasa Malaysia or Bahasa Melayu, Bahasa Indonesia, so you can already reach out to Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia, these three countries, right? But at the other part, the Indo-China plate, it could be totally different. Yeah. So what I'm trying to impress upon everyone is that do your market research well, because this market is unlike the US market. US market, you have a lot of access of information and stuff like that, a lot of public information. But ASEAN, Asia, there needs to be a lot of local experts, who will be able to bring you to navigate the pitfalls. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I agree. To get data about the behavior of the consumer, particularly, I think is harder in Asia. And I want to go back to what Lindsay was saying a lot just now about consumer behavior. Maybe to Lindsay first this time. What do you feel is the big difference when we are talking about health to the consumer in America or in Europe, even the more developed countries to Asia. Again, I'm generalizing Asia. I know we say Asia is so big, but what can you say the big differences you've noticed? You've traveled around a lot, and I'm sure there are very striking differences in terms of consumer behavior when it comes to healthcare.
There is. I mean, the first thing I could maybe share is that in Southeast Asia, the research we've done in partnership with Milu Insight, a Singaporean market research company, we looked across 6 countries in Southeast Asia and found that 52% of women don't feel comfortable openly talking about their health due to fear of judgment or shame. So I think that really raises a point around how are we normalizing conversations around health? Now, I do see when I go back to the US to, again, like Kenneth was saying, coastal, I'm a very coastal person, so a lot of time in California or on the East Coast, I see ads in the market, and I think it is much more front and center. I think we are seeing that change with things like the HPV vaccine and cervical cancer becoming something that we can prevent, with things like menopause, which just this week, KKH Hospital here in Singapore announced the first ever menopause guidelines to really support clinicians and medical providers with their knowledge and awareness of this stage of life and healthcare needs. So I think we're definitely seeing that pivot happen. It's slow and steady. And I look forward to seeing kind of there be a more normalized market pattern. So I think when we talk about consumer behavior and how front and center that is, a big difference is really breaking down that, any kind of stigmas or taboos that may still be settled. And I think this is where I'm really grateful for younger generations as really strong advocates for FemTech and real users of FemTech, especially in capital cities. So for us, again, when we talk about the consumer, we're often in FemTech, we're often talking about those with the funds, the means, or the access for specialist care and technology, when actually when we talk about women's health in FemTech, we need to be thinking about rural communities, those who maybe don't have that everyday access. And that's where technology becomes a lot more powerful. So I think along with exactly what Kevin was saying along the lines of geographies are huge, languages change, people's accessibility changes, but ultimately it's how do we find solutions and build a company or a startup that can actually meet the needs of multiple women with multiple, socioeconomic or geographic locations.
Okay, yeah, I think we forget that Asia has a lot of rural areas still. We see the big cities, we see Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Hong Kong, and We think Asia is like that, but actually that's only a very small part of it, and a huge part are still the rural villages. My question to Kenneth still about consumer behavior, but maybe more on the side of which side are more willing to adopt new innovation? Which one are more risk takers in terms of new healthcare innovation? Because you're really pushing on the boundaries in terms of health innovation. So I'd like to hear what your experience has been.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer this question from two parts. So one is the infrastructure, because to do what we're doing, which is precision diagnostics, where we customize panels, we customize scans, for you to extend your health span. The infrastructure layer is important. So in the US, definitely it's a lot easier to have like API ready builds for all things healthcare, lab ordering, plugging into 3,000 different labs all around the country. That is quick. So that's easier to build innovation on top of infrastructure around the country than in Asia. One real example is that over there we partner with Quest. So Quest Labs and LabCorp are the two big ones all around. The the issue here in Southeast Asia and Asia is that every country has its own lab partner. So you need to build in Singapore, it's Eurofins, Parkway Health, you have your InnoQuest companies, and then in Indonesia you have different labs. In Malaysia you have different labs. So it's difficult to have a one standard fits all market. So then it's difficult to push the innovation through, and that's why the risk is implementation risk on the business end. On the consumer end, I think a lot of the market here still is looking to the West to try things, and then after it's safe, we do it. Yeah. So this is for the Western medicine side of things, which is actually what I think a lot of people are already doing, which is like blood biomarkers, scan interpretation results, not the traditional Chinese medicine or the Ayurvedic stuff, which is secondary, or which is separate and unique to our ethnicity and our Asian populations. So from a pure science-based biomarker led, kidney panel, liver panel, um, uh, innovation front, usually Asia looks to the West to try first, and then we learn. I mean, some exciting ones, I think Lindsay mentioned briefly, hormone replacement therapy, testosterone replacement therapy, you have your peptides coming out soon, your stem cell regeneration, those kind of stuff are still very much being tested in the West. And then if it works, you will start seeing some small clinics here and there, start to do them here. And usually it's only for the wealthy, the wealthy people, and it's usually how these things are done. Yeah.
Right. Okay. A follow-up question to that. I'll get to Kevin in a second. Now we've been looking to the West in terms of pushing the regulatory or setting the regulatory standard. Do you think it is going to be a time when it shifts to the East? I'm giving an example, maybe like right now what we see with EV cars. Of course, it started in the West, but now China itself has completely taken over that market. Do you think we are going to reach that tipping point soon?
I think for clinical and medicine, it's really dependent on where the clinical trials are held. Um, so I would say like clinical trials and research papers right now is still very much Western driven, especially accelerated with AI. So
Yeah.
I think it's different from the battery and the manufacturing use cases, because battery and manufacturing use cases in the view of electric vehicles were very, very clearly China has an edge over the West. So
Mhm.
I would say whoever wins or leads in this AI space, plus have research budgets on aging and clinical related research, is going to win. And I think so far, based on what I see, the time to value or the time to getting the drugs to market is very much big pharma led, which still sits in Pfizer, the Novos, and all this, which
Yeah.
is very much Western.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. I agree. It's
Yeah.
still very, the
What
traditional pharma companies are still
Yeah,
leading
one
on that.
one case is
Yeah,
COVID, right? So COVID back then, if
yeah,
you remember, everyone was either taking Pfizer vaccines versus the Chinese vaccines, which is interesting.
yeah,
So you kind of, if you recall, just barely 5 years since, right? Like a lot of the trust went to the West versus the East, which is interesting because of
Yes.
research and clinical history and background. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes quite a long time to change people's belief and trust, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Kevin, the same question just now, but consumer behavior. What have you noticed in terms of adoption of new technology, new innovation from your experience?
Right. Maybe I would like to answer a bit. I would like to add on to Kenneth's point. I think Kenneth and I has got a lot to talk. So, frankly speaking, as he was mentioning, there's a lot of changes in the market. The Western medicine leading, the Western side of things. So, that's why a lot of the trials are actually done over there. But I would think that there would be some changes in what's happening. Like just last year, GSK signed an agreement with Hengrui, which is a Chinese company, to develop 12 new entities. So I think there was a very high period back then in the early 2000s to 2010. That was the super high period where there is a lot of launch of new drugs. Dr. Azhar, you were there in BI. There's a lot of drug
Yeah.
launches. Like every other year, you will have a lot of new drug launches. But nowadays, we don't see so much of that anymore because there's a lot of consolidation in the market. And back then, I think the Asian market wasn't really Asian companies. They weren't really very strong internationally. Shionogi, a Japanese company, actually out-licensed their rosuvastatin, which became a blockbuster drug, which is
That's
known
right.
as Crestor, to AstraZeneca. It's a multi-billion-dollar drug, but they're not confident in doing it. I think that was the mentality back then. I do not know how to speak English. Let me pass it on to someone else. Yeah, that was the history, right? Right now, and then there were consolidation, the western side of hemisphere, and then for sure, there's less and less new chemical entities being done. And then on the Chinese side of things, right now, they are becoming the research center for many of the new things. So that is something that is interesting, right? And then on the Asian side of things, Southeast Asian, we are more of users, we are copy makers. We try to make things better, right, for the local people. So if to your point that, you're mentioning about the EV stuff earlier, there could be certain changes that's happening in place really that we are not aware of. But the regulatory perspectives will take a long time because in healthcare and pharmaceutical, this type of this type of regulations takes time to change. And to your point, your question earlier on about how the consumer behaviors, in my opinion, Southeast Asian, typically, or Asian, they'll think to look at Western products as better, as better. That's a typical mentality. If I were to ask my patients, back then when I was practicing in Singapore in Guardian, Health and Beauty. I have Indonesian patients coming to me. I want to buy the paracetamol or Panadol in Singapore because it's better. Then I show them that hey, actually it's made in Indonesia, in the GSK factory in Indonesia. They're like, really? So actually, there's that. I think there's a lot of the placebo effect. It's a mentality thing, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
they may think, but actually, in its essence, right, it's the same.
Yeah. I think it's important people to understand how medicine, how healthcare innovation is being assessed by the regulators. Not many people understand that they feel in Asia we have lower standard in terms of the regulators, but it's not true. Maybe even tougher in Asia
Yeah.
in that sense. Yeah.
Maybe I would like to add one more point is that there is a certain aspect that Asia is lacking is actually in terms of the healthcare services and the healthcare professionals standard needing to catch up because okay, a medicine is or a certain treatment is only as good as the person prescribing it. If the person giving it is not up to date and stuff like that, right? So the treatment to the patient becomes lagging because there are certain many clinical trials happening in the West. So when the new information comes to us, it may lack in Asia side, right? So that's why we may not be updated to certain things. So that portion, I think I would like to emphasize that the Asia side of things need to improve on catching up in terms of the competency standards and stuff like that.
In terms of education,
Yes,
Lindsay
yes.
mentioned education to the consumer,
Education.
but it's also education to the healthcare
Care
provider
profession.
to make sure that they are up to date because the healthcare landscape changes so fast, right? Like
Yeah.
I left pharmaceutical a year ago, and some of the things I don't understand anymore just
Yeah.
because 1 year of not keeping up with the latest. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of regulatory, we talk about the regulation. When should startup start discussing with the regulators about their product, about their pathway to market? So maybe I'll go to Kenneth first for that. You've done a lot of new innovation project.
Yeah, as in so I understand, like the pathway to product, right? Like getting the
Yeah.
product to market. I guess in our lens, it's a consumer product. So when I think back, we were doing a lot of waitlist marketing. We would, spend time on forums like Reddit, like places where people have problems with the existing healthcare system, and then we build directly solutions that address those problems that surfaces. And yeah, I think after that, it's really, off to the races. We start building features. So first one is like the lab work reporting, interpretation of the reports, using all the latest models out there to build what we call the Mito brain, which is essentially the brain that powers the health context engine, almost as if like the best concierge doctor in the world would do for every of one of our users. So that's how we get to market, and we just keep getting the friends and family referral marketing. Yeah, that's
Right.
yeah.
When do you start consulting the regulators to make sure that you're on the right track?
In Singapore, when we launched very early on, because our co-founder is a licensed MBBS from Yonglulin, and he was in Tan Tock Seng for a while. Yeah, so I think we already knew we needed to get the HCSA telemedicine license. So I guess the good news is that there is a lot of existing licensing frameworks out there for anything you want to do, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kenneth, for sharing your experience. What about you, Lindsay?
Sure. So maybe one thing I could talk about in this space is, excuse me, is when it comes to regulation, it's still quite light on femtech and women's health. I don't think there's been kind of the in-depth development for, what Kenneth rightly says, frameworks that can kind of guide. We do see with obviously medical devices that's very structured. Anything otherwise, really, we're looking at positioning more in the wellness space despite focusing on health. So that's kind of one of the things a lot of the founders are doing is positioning definitely in the wellness, because to enter into that sector is a little bit easier on the market regulation. I think when we talk about regulation also, we need to look broader into how regulation isn't just from kind of a government perspective, but also kind of, kind of touch on this a little bit, but marketing perspective. When we look at women's health topics, we see that globally about 95% of founders share that they have experienced censorship on online platforms. So when we talk about even marketing regulation, that does also need to change, because even using certain terms, bodily function or body terms, descriptions, vaginal cancer, the hashtag wasn't allowed to be used online. And so how else do you describe that type of cancer if that's what it is? So we do also have a lot of censorship issues, shadow banning, blocking, that we need to look at across our social media and marketing platforms to make sure that we can help build awareness among our consumer bases. And this is also where I think there's been a real pivot from a B2C focus for a lot of femtech companies over the past couple of years, moving more into a B2B or B2B2C, because in order to scale, it really is going to have to be done initially through corporate partners or through insurers. So it's also figuring out who ultimately is going to pay, which maybe is a big difference of the US and in Asia, is who the actual payer is at the end of the line. So again, regulation, don't really have those clear frameworks. A lot of startups looking at wellness, even though they are actually looking at healthcare for positioning and being able to move their businesses forward, looking at marketing limitations, Those are just a few of the things maybe I could touch on with, obviously I'm talking a bit broader scope, and I think you're talking about specific policy regulation, but I just wanted to put some of those other thoughts out there when we look at women's health and the bias that exists with
Yeah.
gender health equity, and even how founders face challenges specifically in women's health and limitations.
Yep, I agree with that. The social media, the media marketing, they're still very traditional in a way, and things are changing so fast that they haven't really kept up with that. We had some trouble before promoting a website where we wanted to tell people where you need to go for a stroke, but we were told we couldn't do that because we were promoting the hospital. So we were like, what?
Doctor, that's a great point. And I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, I'd love to share that if people are interested in learning more about this topic. One of my friends, Anna O'Sullivan, who's in the global FemTech community with me, she started Sense Her Ship. So Sense Her Ship, which is all about kind of the limitations that women experience specifically around women's health topics. So it's a really great platform for people to learn more about how to either overcome or just be aware of those challenges that are out there and what we need to
find
do.
a loophole somewhere, right?
Yeah. So that's a nice reference if anyone's interested.
Thank you, Lindsay. What about you, Kevin? What about how is it in Indonesia?
Right. Dr. Azhar. So I think it's I'm actually experiencing similar situation with Lindsay. So Indonesia is
Okay.
quite I would say, if I were to
Strict.
talk just about women health, right? I think the women's health in Indonesia is quite unexplored, very severely underdeveloped. There is a lot of aspect of religion and stuff like that, so people cannot they cannot be open about it. So it will take time and it will require a lot of aspect because as it is, I think worldwide, right? If you were to look at the end consumer or end patient itself, they are actually not health literate people. Health literacy, if in the US where they are more developed already, they can actually still have people getting misinformation, let alone on our side of the world. So misinformation is happening in many places, and this misinformation is also targeting some of our end consumer, where actually we want to actually help them in a better way, women and stuff like that, right? So what I want to impress upon is that this situation needs to change, and which is why I cannot say it can be changed immediately. It takes time, and this has been so deeply entrenched, like the portion about empowerment and stuff, and getting them. I mean, most Indonesians right now, if you to see that, they are still at the aspect that, okay, I'll listen to my doctor and stuff like that, right? Because they are already at that phase that they don't know about healthcare, they'll just leave it to someone. But the fact is that healthcare requires two aspects and pharmaceutical requires two aspects, because like one, you need to be the patient to be involved. The other one, you need the healthcare professionals and the other stakeholders, such as the payer and stuff like that. So it's quite complicated, if I were to say it in a session. We can have more sessions in the future. We would like to get JDI involved, right? And also FemTech. But if I were to simplify it right now, one thing need to change is that the communication to the patients need to change in a more effective manner. We need to be educating. A lot of things are very haphazard. So it's like, okay, we want to empower them, and yet there are certain restrictions that we cannot do, right? So how can we empower them effectively, right? It's like asking someone to eat with the hands tied behind the back.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I love that you touch a little bit on religion, and I just want to share my observation.
Yes.
I live overseas a long time. I live in the US, UK, Germany, and I came back about 8 years ago. And when I came back, I realized how in Asia how powerful religious authority are, and actually people probably listen to them more than the doctor. So therefore, I feel there's an opportunity there when it comes to education. How do we work better with the mosques, the churches, the temples, about when we have a big widespread program about health education, because actually, especially in Malaysia, the Muslim community really listen to the imam and all that. What they say is the truth. Yeah. So sometimes maybe not so good to believe so strongly, but there's an opportunity for health education there. Okay, let me bring back, let's not talk about religion so much. Okay. Right, so when it comes to a lot of us here want to know about how to scale. That's the big topic for our webinar here. So it'll be, Aisha will be angry with me if I don't discuss this with you all. So when someone already has a pilot project and everything looks good, all the data looks like okay, we can do this. What are the warning signs that people might miss? What are the subtle things that people should be looking out for before they are ready to scale? So the results are in already from the pilot, looks good, but there might be things that people are missing. So maybe I start with Kenneth first.
Yeah. Um, in our case, the early signs was what we call NPS, Net Promoter Score. So we focus a lot on talking to users, like jumping on calls like one-to-one. And I actually still do a lot of that today, where we have feedback sessions with users to hear what they are saying and to know if they are referring friends and family. So that's usually a good way to get a signal whether it's the right time to scale. If you know, if people are complaining there are issues with the operations workflows, then we should go back to the development phase. Yeah.
Okay, so that's like the key thing for you that they are recommending it to their friends.
Yes. Yeah. Just really whether you tell your spouse, right? Do you tell your wife? Do you tell your husband about us? Yeah.
Ah, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
sounds so simple, eh?
Yeah. At the end of the day, that's for health products, I think it's always like that because it's usually very personal. So
Yeah.
yeah, spouse is usually yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. What about you, Lindsay? What advice do you have when people are already thinking they've done the pilot, they are ready to scale? What are the things they should be looking out for?
Sure. I mean, I think, Kenneth, you are spot on when it comes to consumers, is that it's often, who is actually, well, one, who's the payer, right? Is it an insurance company or who's the actual payer, but also who's the healthcare decision maker? And we know that globally, not just in Asia, not just in the US, but globally, that women actually are often the healthcare decision makers for their families. And, I love my husband, but I swear, I mean, you wouldn't even, I make all his dentist appointments, right? So, and this guy is, he's an amazing businessman. And yet here I am making dentist appointments for him. So, I think at the end of the day, what I would say is in the FemTech world and looking at FemTech startups, one thing we need to be really careful about in our industry or our sector of healthcare is not being led by sample sets of one. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that oftentimes people will have and I use this even from an example. I was mentoring a company, really great company, really great idea, a strong concept, hadn't even gone to market to MVP it yet and check it. They spoke with one investor, and that investor changed their whole business. This investor had not invested in FemTech before, wasn't a medical doctor or a clinician, wasn't a researcher in the women's health space, and himself was not a woman. So I think at the end of the day, there was a really big disconnect between making sure we're not just talking to an investor, but we're actually sticking close to the problem that we're solving. And also, I think, not being swayed by the sample set of one where, here in Southeast Asia, we know that only 24% of decision makers in VCs are women. So if we're sitting in a room where it's 3/4 men and we're trying to pitch a breast pump, for instance, and the man says, well, my wife didn't have that problem, so I don't see why this is a problem. Well, the sample set is bigger than one's wife. So I think at the end of the day, it's making sure that we are sampling a large enough size of our target market and making sure that we stay true to our problem and not letting, of course, we need to listen to experts, but if we really know what our problem is and we've done our research and we've done our product market fit, I think we need to have the confidence to progress with our idea, knowing that, of course, we're going to pivot 1,000 times, right? But it's starting off with conviction in our idea that can't be easily swayed, at least through those first few months.
Yeah. I agree with what you said about finding the right expert as well for that area, because I was approached one time by someone who's thinking about developing an oncology product, And up to then, he was already researching about 2, 3 years maybe. He hasn't consulted an oncology doctor. And I was so surprised by that because that would have been my first point of contact, getting an oncology doctor to say, is there any problem is there a market need for this? Yeah, for this product that you are trying to develop. So it's important to find the right number and also the right type of expert when you're consulting about your project. What about you, Kevin? Any
Right.
advice for people who wants to go huge?
Right. So, in my opinion, right, I think many startups tend to want to achieve things fast, right? Like want to grow fast, want to what. But the fact is that if you're very concerned about how it's going to grow in the future, the foundation is most important. I totally agree with what Lindsay say about, having to do a large enough sample size. Sometimes, being a startup founder, there are times when I will pick and choose data to support my own hypothesis, right? But if you want to be really someone who's really able to progress further, you need to be able to absorb information and also internalize information from multiple perspectives, right? For example, if you to look at just Indonesia alone, we have the Java island, which is 150 mil. 150 mil is 60% of Indonesia. 150 mil is Malaysia times 5. Singapore, yeah, times.
Half
So
of
huge.
America.
Yeah, half of America. And it's in that one island only. And if you look at West Java province is 50 mil. But West Java province is very different from what's that, from East and also Central Java. So that being said, right, if you to do market research with your sample size mostly in Java, then you use the same strategy to apply on West Java, Central Java. It's not gonna work that well. There's that differences in culture, even though we are still in the same country. The languages, the if you to look at the female target in maybe East and Central Java, they speak Javanese. But if you target the female population in West Java, they speak Sundanese. So there needs to be certain nuances the customization. I think it's always easy to, okay, let's use one strategy for all. All right. But certain things you might need to customize to be able to hit the right group and to be more successful. Yeah.
Yes. I think at the end of the day, it's going towards personalization. Yeah, we talk a lot about that, and I think it's becoming that way very, very fast in terms of healthcare, and that's what Kenneth is doing, right? And I think we're going to the last topic about the AI in healthcare, and Kenneth is doing so much work on that already. If you have been following Kenneth, you might know that he is 2 years younger than what he is supposed to be, through his intervention. And what else are you seeing out there, Kenneth, besides your own work, which I think is amazing, about how AI has already transformed healthcare right now?
Yeah, I think there's this interesting article by A16Z that health is probably going to be like the most impactful application of AI, because of, number one, how backdated existing healthcare systems are in hospitals and all these things, but also like the consumer starting to be smarter. So you have smarter consumers talking to smarter doctors. That's kind of directionally where AI is, because it gives the consumer a lot of advocacy. No matter whatever problem you're facing, now you can just load it into ChatGPT, and you suddenly become at least a junior doctor understanding of your own biology. So that's very different, versus just 5 years ago, where you go to a GP or a specialist and you have no clue what, any baseline understanding of your own condition. So smarter consumers talking to smarter physicians or smarter specialist doctors. Yeah, that's really the thesis of what we're building towards. ChatGPT Health launched recently. So that's also exciting because they are able to ingest blood work, ultrasound scans, genetic reports. So our goal is to make it even simpler and make it more actionable because you get the data with ideas on what to do, but if you don't get on the prescription, you don't get on the protocol, you don't get on any interventions, your data is still useless because a lot of the work is still the human having to do, sleep better, eat better, move more, and the AI can't do any of these things for us as of today. Yeah.
Yeah, the action is still with the human part, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We're still humans. I mean, as of today, we're not like like cyborgs for now. But
Not yet,
maybe,
not yet.
maybe with Neuralink and all these things, then we will subconsciously fall asleep at 10 p.m. and wake up at 6 every day. Yeah.
That would be awesome. What about you, Lindsay, in terms of what do you see right now that has impressed you in terms of AI in healthcare?
So yeah, I think first of all, we are looking at mainly kind of still for women's health. Again, I'm only talking about FemTech and women's health, looking at mainly kind of the monitoring, the tracking, diagnosis. So looking at, fertility with embryo selection or fertility prediction. So pregnancy, looking at fetal health, oncology, so imaging around breast cancer, ovarian cancer, these types of things. So outside of fertility, pregnancy, and oncology, we haven't seen kind of a huge amount of AI kind of inserted into women's health. Now, I will say, I'm not sure if anyone saw this week, but Aura Ring, which I think, Kevin, you're wearing one, which would make, Kenneth, you're wearing one, which would make sense given your work in longevity and health span and tracking and monitoring being such a key part of that. I think the really interesting announcement this week was Aura, the ring, announcing their first LLM designed specifically for women's health. So actually building within their own infrastructure to avoid any kind of bias from, the build of AI, actually creating it. Now, along with that, what I found really interesting to kind of bring in that Aura advisors along with, clinical experts and putting that knowledge together was actually the most interesting part to me was the fact that they were very deliberate in their build to make it non-dismissive and emotionally supportive. So again, talking about consumers, specifically women, and how they feel when they go in person to a medical doctor, these are two things that crop up. So it's even interesting to think of how AI is the tool, of course, not the solution, but the tool. But the layers that we put on top of that to build a more personalized experience, not only for our own health, but actually how we interact with the machine to feel like it actually isn't dismissing our concern or that it is actually saying, we'll support you. So those are a couple of things that I think are exciting when I think about expanding in, fertility, pregnancy, and oncology, and then starting to see market leaders like Aura actually building ring-fenced infrastructure with unbiased data to create women-specific AI that, can hopefully really advance our learning and knowledge about our bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the monitoring is the big part that's going to transform healthcare in the future. The continuous monitoring,
Yeah.
that even in hospital, I still wonder why we have to check the patient every few hours when we should be able to continuously monitor everybody now already instead of the nurses going every 3 hours check the blood pressure and all that. It feels so backward. Yeah.
There's a really cool company called Biorhythm that actually they're building their platform to integrate with clinic platforms so that actually the doctor can watch throughout the pregnancy instead of just those normal checks, can actually, check throughout in case there's any anomalies in what they see. I think, Kenneth, were you going to say something also?
I was gonna echo your point, but it's you brought up Aura, which is a very unique example. So if you see the path that Aura and Whoop went down, it's it's um it's contrarian to what a traditional go-to-market person would, a consultant from a MBA would say, which is, oh, you sell to the doctor will sell this solution to the patient and everything, because it's not obvious that going through the consumer advocacy route is a lot stronger. And the same thing for us. We could have easily sold our solution to concierge doctors, serving very, very wealthy individuals, but we went through the consumer route because it's a faster feedback loop. The user of the product is still the consumer, it's not the doctor. A lot of companies go down the wrong path of building for the doctors because when they go down that path, the solution is usually not adopted well by the end user, who is actually a consumer, because the user interface is clunky. It's not designed for like a user to open it up 5 times a day, 6 times a day. Versus Aura, it's so beautifully designed. Whoop is also very, very good. They understand the real user intent. And then now the doctors are prescribing Aura, Whoop to the user. So they went around it, not through the problem. Yeah.
Well, yeah, very interesting, right? I think another example are all the glucose monitoring. It's
Yeah.
now has gone leaps and bounds into the future already, and it has helped a lot of people even reverse their pre-diabetes and all that. So it's going to change so much in the future in terms of that what we do with monitoring. And Kevin, last one to answer the question. What has impressed you so far with AI in healthcare?
Right. So with regards to me, right, what I am looking for in healthcare for my patients is something to educate them. So as it is right now, there would probably I'm very focused on chronic diseases. So typically what I have right now for my patients is still very manual. So we have healthcare professionals to educate them, how to manage this, how to manage that. We have certain solutions right now, they say this app can talk to you and stuff like that. But I think because we are in the service part, patients, there is certain aspect that AI or any softwares cannot replace the human touch. The human touch is, like if let's say my patients were to contact me, or anything, they'll always try to contact me first. They may not, they have certain preferences for healthcare professionals, right? And AI, I think it will take a bit of time, but I'm really hoping that if let's say there's an AI that can actually follow certain avatar, and then then they would be able to communicate with the patients, and that would be the something that would change, you know, advising them on how to eat their medicine, when it is actually supposed to be human. I would really like, if we were in the Star
I
Wars
think it's there
era.
already. I
Uh,
think it's
that-
available already.
it is, but I think this human touch is still quite missing, I would say.
Okay.
Being able to understand the patient's context, being able to, to understand the patient's worries.
Oh, you
And
mean the two-way
yeah, the
communication,
two-way
right?
communication. If it's like a communication in terms of ABC, like instructional based, no problem. But
Yeah.
our patients have worries. They have this part, that portion is still need to be managed. But
Right.
if that can
Okay.
be done, wow, that would really change how healthcare practice is gonna work.
Is that why you do a lot of TikTok, Kevin?
Possibly. No, because I like to educate my patients.
Yeah, very, very good videos, by the way, Kevin.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, then I have to say thank you to everybody. We are out of time in terms of our session today. After this is the Q&A, and I hope you have enjoyed the discussion. For me, if I want to summarize, is that healthcare innovation is such a vast space, and there is still so many opportunities for us to venture into it. And right now, we are probably just at the beginning compared to other industry. AI in healthcare is still at the beginning, and there is still a lot of opportunities. And I like that when from the discussion, for me, if I want to say one thing, what you need to do is to really understand your customer, the consumer itself. What do they actually want? What are they asking? What are they questioning? And if you are able to answer those, then there's a good chance you can be successful with your innovation. Yeah. Of course, the bigger picture, there's a lot of discussion, but if I want to summarize that, that would be my message from the discussion today. And I want to thank Kenneth, Lindsay, and Kevin for being so open in sharing their ideas and what they have learned so far in their years of working so far. So I'll pass on to Aisha for our Q&A now.
Okay. Thank you for the splendid work, Dr. Az. It was great moderating. Really, really had a good flow of the whole session. And I think we've already got some questions in the chat. The first one, I think, Dr. Az, please be prepared for the first question regarding oncology clinical trials. And to everybody in this call, you can start typing your questions in the chat. Yeah. Then we'll get to them when as much time as we have. First one, Dr. Asmi prepared. Oncology clinical trials and patient data collection would benefit from closer collaboration in ASEAN. Singapore would be the ideal, I'm not sure about this, but this is what is being coined by Alex, the ideal IP and governance hub. How can better collaboration happen between vastly, I guess, different jurisdictions and standards so that ASEAN and Asian clinical data achieve much better representation? It's a long question. I think it talks about collaboration and maybe data exchange,
Yeah.
and also data collection and data exchange, more around that lah. Yeah. What do you think, Dr. As?
So for regulation of clinical trials and approval, so the registration, there are now many initiatives to combine the assessment work. So what Alex is saying is correct, that when you do that, it's a lot faster. So there are some different collaboration happening already between Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia. There are pathway to collaborate with FDA as well, with the Australian regulatories. So there are many pathways where countries are combining their assessment already. So countries are realizing that why waste time doing our own assessment? So let's combine and do the work together and get faster. So that's already in place right now. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Good to know. Lindsay, I think you have a regional perspective with regards to specifically for FemTech. Do you have any thoughts regarding collaboration, especially with data exchange and probably insight sharing?
Sure. So I mean, so the femtech industry across Asia is far from super saturated. As a matter of fact, there is so much white space. So as of right now, it's an incredibly generous and incredibly collaborative industry. People are very open to sharing. Now, obviously, data, especially women's data, as we've seen a bit of a crisis of management in the US of women's data and the ramifications and repercussions that can happen with that sort of sharing. Data is not shared, of course, but learnings and insights that are anonymized and are shared, of course. And kind of that more data and insights from a learning and research perspective. So I would say that collaboration is probably the most important thing, i.e. partnerships throughout Asia to advance women's health and femtech, because the reality is one country alone cannot lead this. It needs to be a really integrated model to grow to scale. And so I guess my thoughts really are around what you just said, which is collaboration is key.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's really an integrated ecosystem play, right? In order really to get things going. I'm gonna come back to Alex's question later. Let's give other people a chance to get their questions answered. We've got one from Briac. What is the view of the panel on consumers using supplements such as NMN, okay, I'm having trouble pronouncing it.
Spermis.
Spermidine.
Oh, okay.
It comes to assessing their labs. Is there increasing interest in this and might it be classed as licensable in future? I think Kevin, you're the best person to answer this
Dr. Azhar is also potentially a good person to answer
yeah.
this.
Yeah,
Dr.
definitely.
Azhar,
Okay,
maybe
Dr.
Dr.
Asa
Azhar.
and Kevin, one of you who can start first, whoever who wants to start first.
Right. So NMM is nicotinamide mononucleotide. So it's related to vitamin B3. So I think there is a lot of these new chemicals being actually launched. But from if let's say you to say from a perspective of a person of healthcare, right? So many of these products, right, are actually not tested on a large scale enough clinical trials. So I cannot say it may be beneficial for some people, right? But it may not be beneficial to all. So when we are
Yeah.
in pharmaceutical, right, we really it's a very rigorous testing. We do as double-blinded randomized clinical trial. So those kind of standard is very difficult to reach for supplements, right? There could be people who are willing to do that, but the amount of money is huge. Pharma companies spend 10 years just to research on it and to launch it at the end. And they only have 10 years of lifespan to actually sell the products. Health supplements are slightly different because if I were to put it bluntly, health supplements are the categorization of health supplements is that they cannot, as long as they do not overclaim certain things, right? If they overclaim, then they cannot, right? So like for certain medicine, they have said, this is for this cancer, really directly the word. For vitamin supplements, they're going to say to help something to help, right? So it's a two different category. So will there be a model that can actually, in my opinion, that can achieve something that is very successful? I really don't know, because it is still a lot on the marketing side of things. I would say this is my perspective. Dr. Azhar, back to you.
Yeah, Dr. Azhar, back to you.
I think Kenneth will be better for answering this.
Everybody's just throwing the hot potato around.
Or I'm just like, is Kenneth measuring that in your lab?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about all these things is like ultimately they are claims. So if you were to look at NMN and spermidine in particular, like NMN has been around for like 3-4 years, and every year there's a new one that's coming out. And then usually you will see it on Reddit, on r/biohackers. You will see it on, Peter Thiel's podcast, or maybe now not so much. Huberman and all these guys, Brian Johnson. So there will always be a new thing that's coming out. I think the ones that are interesting to follow is your big supplement brands, and more recently like IM8. So IM8 is started by a Malaysian entrepreneur, but very global, very US centric, with David Beckham as the main guy, and the number one female tennis player, Arnar Sabalenka, as spokespersons. So those you would see is usually very celebrity led, and it's celebrity led for a reason, because it's usually painting a lifestyle that you want to follow, not a prescription that is a disease centric ramification. So it's different. It's a lifestyle that you want to follow versus a disease. So that's what I would say. Yeah. Evidence wise, I think there's some evidence, but it's not strong evidence. So that's where yeah, and it wouldn't be licensable. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Az, do you have any comments to chime in?
No, I agree with both of them with that one. A tricky
Okay.
subject.
Yeah, I understand. Kenneth, there's a bunch of questions for you. Do you want to take them all together? I think the last three questions are for you. I think the last question is also for the rest of the panelists, but I let you answer first lah. Yeah, no need to go into too much detail, because I think if in the back end I can always link them up to you for further query. But I think you can give a top line answer for now lah, so to
Sure.
benefit everybody.
Yeah, the US expansion one is interesting. After we ran a clinic in Singapore for a year and a half, we looked at neighboring markets. The challenge for our model is that it's a high order value product, and the baseline is like $300 to $500 to start with. And it's very difficult to attract that kind of spending power in this region. So the natural pathways is either China or US, and we have more connections in the US, and it's easier to land and expand in the US. So that's why we decided the US. And we are a tech company, so it makes more sense to be there as well. So that's the first question. The second question I would say is it's very real, because at the start, as in any startups maybe on this call, usually it's a B2B, B2C thing. Do we have more connections with doctors? Do we have more connections with consumers? And ultimately, if you're your own consumer of your own product, then you should go the consumer path, because you're unlikely that you are a doctor selling to a doctor. If not, it's highly unlikely to have a very strong doctor builder personas, at least based on what I've seen. It's usually you're outside looking into the space. So I feel it's easier to build the consumer product that you will use, and then you convince more of the personas like yourself to use the product, and then the doctors will start to take notice for sure.
Okay, okay. I think we're down to the last question. Regarding the pathway to production discussed earlier for early stage startups, how do we typically transition from an MVP to something that's ready for clinical use, and which regulatory bodies should we engage with? And also, what stage would you recommend starting the regulatory approval process? I think this was discussed a bit during the panel discussion, but I guess people wanted more specific tactics around this. So I open the floor to any of the panelists to answer this question. I'm not sure. Maybe Lindsay, you might want to chime in first.
Yeah, I think this is one of those questions that it really depends. I mean, early stage startups, it could be anything across anything. So I think I would love to learn more from this individual about what they're trying to launch with details, because it's hard to say, like, this is exactly what you should do just on a very general level. Especially, I mean, when I'm thinking of FemTech, which I'm guessing this person probably doesn't do FemTech just by percentages of likelihood of a founder. So I don't really know how to say exactly what they should do, because I don't know what their product is. Again, are they doing a supplement? Are they doing a medical device? Are they doing, an AI-driven app? I'm not sure. So I suppose it comes back to everything we've talked about on this call today. But if Chuan Wong wants to chat later, happy to, if FemTech and women's health is relevant, happy to walk through some of the processes we've seen or case studies we've seen.
Okay. I think that's about all the time that we have. We are left with around 4 more minutes. I just want to cover the rest of the slides that we
I
have in
think you
terms
have
of the
one more
resources.
question
Oh, one more
from
question.
the one that you skipped from Alex.
Oh, yes. Really, regarding AI, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, let's quickly go through that. AI will be critical in streamlining with documentation for clinical processes to expedite and clarify procedures, especially across geographies and jurisdictions. Of course, AI will, with a human at the wheel, is still a critical aspect of AI implementation. Your thoughts? Open to any of the panelists. Maybe we start with Kevin.
Right. Okay. So to answer Alex's question, right, about for me, I think AI is helpful in helping to streamline, let's say, medical reports. I think that because like sometimes when a practitioner we are typing our diagnosis or initial assessment of the patients, sometimes we may type in a fast manner. So that's why certain Dr. Azhar, sorry to mention it, that's why certain doctors' handwriting is not nice in the past. And then pharmacists have to try to, what is this handwriting? Yeah, but I think it could assist a lot in the administrative stuff. I'm not sure whether it would be helpful in the clinical processes yet, in terms of the what's that this for the procedures. But I would think that if it were to be implemented on administrative related, because okay, in my opinion, software's AI is really very big buzzword. It's too big buzzword. At its essence right now, they're still softwares. Softwares can only help to simplify things that are really quite repetitive, quite not being done properly, which can be making things which is to make things simplified. Like for example, softwares can actually help to detect drug interaction better than human beings, right? Because they are able to look at this multiple. They have certain caveats which they can do very well in that area. That's what software AI can do right now, in my opinion. But if you ask them to do many other things, cannot yet, right? So human is still a lot behind the wheel for healthcare, in my opinion, because we need to make the final decision. But AI can help to make things smoother.
All right, it's more like human augment AI or AI augment human,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Any other panelists want to chime in before we conclude the session? Okay. All right. Can I get to the next slide, please? Okay, before we wrap up, I'm just going to make this quick. If you're thinking about building or extending tech teams in Vietnam, please scan the QR code. Just a bit of a resource here. It's a Vietnam developer salary forecast. It's practical, it's market grounded, and built for founders making real hiring decisions. So just quickly scan the QR code because we're moving on to the next slide already. I will share the slides in the follow-up email, so don't worry if you didn't get it. Next slide, please. Okay, this is something from FemTech Association Asia. They have released a report that's in collaboration with ESCAP. Lindsay, do you have anything you want to give a liner about this?
Sure, really quickly, because I know we're out of time. We are at
Yeah.
so don't want to do too much. So basically, we partnered with the United Nations SCAP to study the industry, the femtech industry in Southeast Asia. Again, if anyone wants to read it, it's online. If anyone wants to talk about it, link up on LinkedIn or shoot me an email. So happy to connect.
Okay, thank you. All right, next slide, please. All right, Kai, need you to chime in here regarding your program, which startups can receive up to 500,000 Singapore dollars.
Yes,
I think
yes.
everybody wants to know about that.
Yes, so we will have info sessions on the 4th of March and the 11th of March. You can sign up using the link on the left side. We also have an in-person networking session tomorrow at CHI, the Center for Healthcare Innovation building itself. It's from 4 to 6. Refreshments and drinks will be provided. So if you are available, please feel free to come. Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, last slide already. Okay, as we close, I'd like to bring us back to the theme, reality check. Scaling healthcare isn't about fancy decks, AI buzzwords, funding headlines. It's actually about, what I gathered is about infrastructure, it's about teams, regulatory strategy, operational readiness, and most importantly, humility when we enter these new markets, to really understand the customers. To our moderators, Dr. Azhar, Lindsay, Kevin, Kenneth, to FemTech Association Asia and Chisel, and to all of you who are here, thank you so much for joining us. Let's continue the conversations beyond the room because scaling healthcare isn't a solo journey, it's an ecosystem work, as Lindsay has mentioned. So thank you so much for being here. Have a nice day ahead. I know it's still early in the morning. I think you have a rest of the day that you can spend working. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye, Shah. Thanks.